from TLDR News, this is Too Long Didn't Read. It's been a little while since we last recorded, so a lot's happened. I feel like we're going to be talking about a lot of what's already happened. Zach's here.
Hello, everyone.
So's Nelson.
Hello.
And a new person to the podcast, Josh, who's a US writer. So I feel like we're going to be talking about a lot of US stuff today.
Hello.
Let's dive into a topic.
Fine. Well, yeah, we can start with the US then.
And Josh, you actually know things about US elections, so
It's like 2.5 weeks-ish now, nearly 3 weeks. And currently, Joe Biden's up in the polls, like on average by about 10 points, which obviously we all know the polls are a bit misleading sometimes, and that doesn't mean everything, but it's quite a sizable gap to So I mean that makes it relatively likely that he could win, but obviously, as we know, it's all about the electoral college. Do you think I should give a bit of a rundown of that in case anyone doesn't know?
you could talk about some key states. Do you know what the polling is in any of those key states, or anything that might be a turn?
Obviously, I think the main key one, the main swing state, is Florida because of how many votes it has, and I think it's pretty tight at the minute. But I think Biden is very slightly favoured, so that's got 29 electoral college votes. It makes it like it's got to be in the top five size-wise. But Biden is favoured in that, and that, like, there's talk that if Trump doesn't win Florida, he's got absolutely no chance of winning it. So that's probably the one to look out for. 538, which is a forecasting website, estimates that Joe Biden has like an 87% chance of winning, which obviously 13% chance it could still happen that Trump wins, but 87 out of 100 is quite a big thing to overcome for Trump. It's actually like Biden's gained a lot in the last couple of weeks since Trump got COVID. I don't know like how you want to interpret that, but it was only an 80% chance when Trump got COVID, so it's increased quite a lot. I don't know, we might discuss the debates a little bit, but debates don't really tend to make a huge difference. But we all saw the first debate, and then the vice presidential debate. I think they were quite bitty, but interesting stuff in there.
Do you think that the high chance of victory that's been predicted for Biden actually doesn't help him too much? Because this was similar with Clinton in the last election, wasn't it? I mean, I don't know exactly what the percentage was that 538 gave Clinton around this time, but she was predicted a fairly large,
I'm not
victory.
sure. I'm not sure about the actual prediction, but I think on polling day, she was only up by 3 points, and she won by 3 points in terms of the popular vote. So obviously, you can win by 3 points, 3 million votes or whatever it was, and lose the electoral college. But I think with a 10-point lead, as well as if the fact you favoured in Florida, I mean, it's quite hard to not win the electoral college from that. But I mean,
I also think I'm surprised people are being so wary. I mean, obviously everyone's worried about being burnt twice by the whole Clinton thing, but I'm not sure how strong the Clinton-Biden analogy holds. There are so many things now. Also, the fact that pollsters have recalibrated their polls to include, essentially the education divide, which is a reliable indicator of which way you're going to vote. And they're now polling those swing states that they underpolled last time around. I'm just quite optimistic. Well, I have a lot more faith in the pollsters this time around. I think they've calibrated their methodology properly, and I think that was pretty evident in the midterms in 2018 when they got what they predicted.
Yeah. Do you think, though, that especially with coronavirus being what it is, that there being such a large, them being so confident that Biden's going to win this could stop people? Because, people might not already want to go out to the polls. There's already a lot of talk about the mail-in ballots and everything might dissuade people from voting because they feel like Biden's already, a certainty. I mean, we've seen that in previous US elections. I mean, I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head, but the ones where at least in the UK.
Well, last time.
Last time can be. Last time's a good example, but there's more historic examples of that too. Or is that? Do you not think that that's a concern at all?
Well, I mean, I guess it is naturally a concern. You become complacent, but also I think just to Democrats and stuff, and people on the Liberal side, this has been such like a horrible 4 years that they're really nailing home the message about voting, and everything you listen to has like sign up to vote, you've got to vote, like go and vote early. Like they're really like I don't know what difference that's going to make, but they're really really pushing it.
Yeah, I also think the polls are far more in Biden's favor, especially given that they're properly polling places like Ohio and Florida, than they were in Clinton's favor. And yet, if anything, I'm just going to use the term liberals, or the liberal media seems more cautious than it did last time round. I think that's unlikely that there's going to be the whole complacency thing. The top article in The Economist at the moment is a wary Economist article saying that actually Biden is quote unquote only 9 points ahead, and like that's the degree of like ridiculous caution that everyone's now exercising because of how bad it was last time around. So I think if anything, last time around makes that whole complacent, I can't be bothered to turn out, he's definitely going to win thing that much less likely.
And do you not think that coronavirus, with mail-in ballots being so widely available, do you think that kind of eliminates the fear of people going out to vote and they're happy to use mail-in ballots?
I don't know exactly how that will play into turnout, but I think that's a separate issue. You know what I mean? Like the logistical limits of mail-in balloting and how that might affect turnout. If that does indeed affect turnout, I don't think that will be because of complacency.
No.
That'll just be.
I think more of the issue with the mail-in ballots is how it's, first of all, if they're gonna like be counted, and there's all the stuff about like the legal aspects of that, and Trump sort of trying to like delegitimize all that. But the issue, more of the issue with the mail-in ballots is that it's because in some states they can't be counted until the day of the election. There's gonna be a situation where you don't know a lot of the how a lot of people have voted, and there is talk that like a lot more Democrats are voting mail in this election, and there's potentially a case where if it's sort of relatively tight on election night, it's going to look like Trump's won a lot because Republicans have turned out on the day. Whereas then like Democrat voters could sort of trickle in the next few days. So there's worries that if it's tight, Trump's just going to like claim victory there and then just sort of ignore everything after that.
Yeah, I think they should be talking about that more. I think Democrats at least should be making that more of an expectation, because I think you're right, that's just exceptionally likely to happen. That's going to be the case where on polling day, Trump might look like he's ahead in Florida, for example, or stuff like that. And if people aren't aware of, do you know what I mean, how sort of extended this process is expected to be, that's going to turn into a whole nother big constitutional thing of Trump being like, I was ahead on polling day. They stole it from me. I'm sort of semi-trying a Trump voice there, but I'm just going to stop. And I think that I think this essentially should be made more common knowledge in the media, so that this is not a shock if it does happen. Yeah. And it can't be manipulated for political gain.
Give an indication of sort of how far ahead Biden is polling wise, is that like in a state like Texas where you traditionally think that's like easy Republican, and it has been in the past. Like stuff I've been listening to has just been detailing this a lot better than I can, but just it's always been a Republican stronghold. But even now it's only like a 3-point lead for Trump, and it's becoming a bit of a swing state. It's not in the swing state range really, but like if it continues like this, it might well do soon. And obviously that's a lot of votes as well.
And what do you think about, because I was looking into this a few weeks ago, just because I wanted to know about, doing something on election day in the US or something like that. So I was looking a little bit into this about when we will know the absolute final result in the US election. From what I could tell, no one's absolutely certain, and it all depends on how many mail-in ballots are used. But what have you got any thoughts? Do you think that we're going to know with a relative degree of certainty on the day, or do you reckon it will still be a long time?
It depends on, as I said, it depends on how. Obviously, you won't be able to tell how big the gap is probably on election night, but it depends how big the gap is in terms of like if it's a 10-point lead, you probably will be able to tell. It won't be confirmed, but you'll be able to tell on election night or within the next few days, from what I understand. But if it's any closer, then what the polls are suggesting, then you could be in for people have estimated like weeks or months, and no one can say because this kind of situation obviously hasn't happened before. But if you look at like in 2000, as everyone keeps bringing up, when it was very close again, that took another, I think it was in December, early to mid December by the time that got decided, and that was only when the Supreme Court got involved and said you've got to stop. So I mean, you just no one knows, but I think it's to do with how close it is, really.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And what about, because I've also read in the last few weeks about a 269-269 split. Do you reckon that's just not going to happen, or do you think that's still a relative possibility?
I've heard like people worried about that, but I just think the likelihood of that happening and the
so small
because of how diverse the votes in each state are. Like they're like like odd numbers and stuff. The likelihood of all of everything aligning for that to happen is just crazy. But you can't really rule it out at the minute.
No, I also do remember in 2016, I seem to remember there being some speculation about a 269-269 split then, and it was nowhere near. So, yeah, I certainly think people seem to want to try and make things out to be more exceptional than they actually are, and possibly trying to do that again this time.
I think there's just so many fears,
So, what about? Should we move on to the debate?
Yeah, we can talk about those if you want. Yeah. Anyone want to give a little hot take? Nelson, you got a hot take?
It was a typical debate. Trump was Trump, Biden was Biden.
That is a hot take if I heard one. That is.
Yeah, it's so Trump kept butting in, and Trump kept butting in and interrupting Biden, which eventually led to proposed rule changes for the subsequent debates that are now not happening. But it was just a mess.
It was almost frustrating to watch Biden try and keep his calm so much. Like it was so obvious that he was trying not to be drawn into anything, but Trump was butting in, doing all that. And I mean, he did the whole "Will you shut up, man?" line that went everywhere afterwards. But other than that,
he made some merch out of that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that was in keeping with your accent of Trump there, Zach.
Yeah, no, I know. I just wanted to deflect.
Yeah. No, but I just think it was watching him try and keep his cool was almost infuriating, because it was clear that Trump was trying to like bait Biden out, but it just didn't really go anywhere, and all of the butting in and everything else, it was just a nightmare to watch, really. But at least the vice presidential debate was a bit cleaner. So there was that.
It felt like a normal times, that one.
Yeah,
to a degree. Yeah. Apart from all of the deflecting from every question, but it felt a bit more civilized.
Also, that's quite normal.
The fact that people are sitting down helps.
Yeah. Things politicians have to deflect. That's what
they've always done. That was quite standard.
Yeah. But that first one, I still think I watched that, and I remember watching it and seeing that whole Proud Boys moment with him saying, what was it, stand back and stand ready. Yeah. And I still don't understand what he was trying to go for there, because there was so much of people talking over each other that it was difficult to sort of decipher what he was going with. And, I think
he said since that he's sort of retracted that kind of sentiment since then. But yeah, I agree. I didn't understand what he was saying at the time. It was only afterwards, when there was coverage, like I sort of understood, like how you can't, obviously that's very bad to say, but I just didn't clock it at the time.
No, and as you say, I didn't either. And there was a lot of like talking over. So once you watch the clip and you know what you're listening for, you can pick up on it. But what was he going for? If he doesn't know who they are, what was the sentiment he was going for? I mean, yeah, it's difficult to
maybe he tried to say stand down, but just messed up his words.
Yeah, it's a possibility. I mean,
it's very hard to get in the mind of Donald Trump, though, isn't it?
Yeah, that is true.
But the way he sort of said it and the way he looked smugly saying it, I don't think it was much of a mistake.
No, possibly not. It was. I thought that was one of the bigger moments from the first one, from the presidential debate, was that stand back, and obviously the media picked up on that as well. Aside from the butting in,
I was just slightly, surprised by how bad Trump's sort of what's the right way of putting it? Like his tactics were in the debate. I think the only way in which anyone could have been properly affected by the debate, everyone knew that what they're getting with Trump, the only person who could have lost in that debate was Biden, and that's if he had what you'd call a senior moment. And Trump didn't even give enough time to have a senior moment. Even when Biden started stumbling, you just had Trump barreling over the top of him with some nonsense about something or other, Antifa or something, which meant that even if Biden was poised to have a senior moment, and that actually would have hurt his campaign chances.
I don't think all the shouting over, like if you're trying to pull in, I mean, I don't really understand like their tactics anyway, but if you're trying to pull in undecided voters,
I agree, yeah, that as well.
Then it doesn't make you look particularly presidential.
I also think his tactics subsequently have done it's the same thing. Like I thought that and maybe it's all just luck and it was just the way his personality plays into it. But in 2016, it might have looked chaotic, but it did look like there was a bit of method to the madness. Do you know what I mean? Like he was obviously playing the sort of like anti-establishment card. The crooked Hillary thing was a good attack line. It worked. And then this year, he's come. It's the same thing actually after the debates. He's come out of the coronavirus thing. He's hemorrhaging essentially old white voters, and he's done a whole like coronavirus is fine, like don't listen to anyone sort of shenanigans.
He seems to be using like the same sort of tactics, but there isn't as much to attack Biden on as you may have thought there were on Hillary, like with the emails and stuff like that. Like there doesn't seem to be as much of an attack line, but the same sort of strategy of attack seems to be happening.
So, I mean, do you reckon that because of his, performance in that first debate, that's why he might not be wanting to do this virtual debate? Because I thought when you were saying then, Zach, about the fact that he was trying to like almost bait Biden into saying something that will screw over his own campaign.
Well, no, that's what I thought he should have done.
Yeah.
And he didn't do that. He just kept on speaking.
No, but I heard that prior to the debate that they were saying that either should be his strategy or that his strategist should be telling him to do that. I was thinking that because he didn't do that in the first debate, that he'd be eager to try and do that in the second debate. Especially because of the speculation that's come out since that he probably should have done that. So I'm struggling to sort of find, realise why he's not...
I think he should have done it in the first debate, and any sane campaign strategist would have told him that.
Yeah.
But he's obviously either got a rubbish team or he just has no impulse control. Like, that's just the most obvious tactic humanly possible. Ask Biden complicated questions, watch him struggle over the inability to recall policy details, and then do a whole Sleepy Joe thing. I'm not... Sorry, I just cannot be doing this nonsense accent thing.
Yeah,
it's so
you keep
tempting.
trying.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, but this is supposed to be like a proper podcast, and so I don't think it's that like if either okay. I don't think it will, my point is that I don't think it will change for the next debate, because like if he must have known, or at least someone in his campaign must have known for the first debate, and if they didn't, well then they're not going to know for the second debate. And also, if they did, but they told him and he just went ahead and got all grumpy and shouty and impulsive, then he's just going to do the exact same thing in the second debate. So I don't think it will change, but yeah.
I'm not sure. Like, surely you've got to at least give him credit for being able to adapt to strategy. Like I understand what you're saying, that the strategist might be sat there thinking, if he did this in the first debate, then he's just going to do the same in the second. But surely you could, as a strategist, your job is to tell him that was bad in the first debate, do this differently in the second.
No, because I think if there's anything you've seen in the last couple of months, it's that whoever Trump's strategists are, they're either idiots or they have no control over Trump. Because no sane campaign strategist would go to Trump afterwards. You've just had COVID, the whole Superman shenanigans, go out there and say that it's basically not real and that no one's worried about it. Like, you're hemorrhaging votes to older white voters, and Joe Biden's line, which seems to be working, is we got the voices. We've got to stop the virus. That sort of shenanigans.
Yeah.
And no sane campaign strategist would go out and say, yeah, just keep doing the whole COVID's not really bad.
Is that
thing.
not what riles up his base, and that's who he's trying to get to turn out?
But at this point, we've just been talking about the polling. I think Trump must know that he needs more than his base to turn out.
Yeah.
And it really, if that again, that just goes back to the point. If he's consciously playing to his base, then he hasn't got any good electoral strategist on his team, because that's not going to win him an election. And I think what's more likely is they just don't have any control over him, and it's the stuff that gets him cheers and that maintains his approval rating in the Republican Party.
He relies on a lot of like visuals, doesn't he? Like in terms of the debates, like in 2016, there was you know, how he was sort of like stalking Hillary Clinton around the stage, and there's pictures of him like sort of like, it looks like he's sort of properly standing over her and stuff, and you know, like everything with, you know, the masks like properly play into the ability to use visuals and stuff, like, you know, in the first debate when he whipped out his mask and started like waving it around like, I don't need, well, I'll put it on when I want to, kind of thing. And I just think maybe the reason they're not interested in doing a video debate is because it doesn't give him as much ability to do that back. That's just speculation, really. I don't know if that's got any founding. But
well, he did say, I think he did say in an interview since that they'll, I can't remember the exact words, but it was effectively in a virtual debate they can cut your mic off. That's not what debating is about. So, you know, I think there is evidence that what you're saying is right, and that it's to do with the visuals and it's to do with the actual mechanics of how an in-person debate works. But even then, surely Trump's got not much to lose considering the polls at the minute, and everything to gain from a debate. And I know that you're saying that, you know, debates don't swing that many people, but, you know, he needs voters. And
I agree, he should take it, I think.
Yeah, even if you can win over a small number of voters in a swing state, you know, that could be, you know, a deciding factor. I mean, it's unlikely, but it's worth a shot. So
I think he originally wanted to spin it as a Biden's hiding from the debate thing. We're not doing this nonsense, but it wasn't Biden's decision, and I don't think that attack line has landed.
No. But it's difficult because we're in the UK and we see, you know, or at least I see the reports from, you know, UK media. So maybe that's playing differently in the US to what I'm seeing in the UK. But from what I've seen, as you've said, Zach, that's not being played off as a Biden decision to hold the virtual debate, and therefore
because
it
wasn't.
Well, no, exactly. But just because it wasn't doesn't mean that it can't be played that it was his decision. And Trump certainly tried to make it look like that, and it hasn't landed here. But what my point is, it might have landed in the US, but I honestly don't know. But yeah, it just seems like a strange decision not to do the virtual debate. But maybe there's some method behind the madness that we don't know about. But I find that unlikely.
It's looking very unlikely.
We'll see next month or next year.
Yeah. And then what about the vice presidential debate? How
it was better.
Yeah, I thought that. I thought it was a lot more civilized.
I think Kamala Harris came across very well.
Yeah.
Pence also came across as a lot more, you know,
presidential,
presidential than Trump would. However you want, like whoever you agree with or whatever. But I think it was a much more, you know, like traditional debate.
I think Pence came across remarkably well. I thought I haven't seen loads of Pence over the last 4 years.
Yeah, same.
Obviously, I don't have the same, you know, I don't follow US politics as much as you probably do, Josh, but yeah, I haven't seen loads of him over the last 4 years, but in that debate, he seemed like he really knew his stuff. He seemed like he could really, like, you know, hammer home certain messages. You know, I thought he came across really well. I'm the same with Kamala, to be fair, but I didn't really know what to expect from Pence. I hadn't really seen tons of him. But
to be honest, I haven't seen a great deal of him either, and he was, you know, and his tone and sort of like demeanor were impressive, and so was Kamala. Like she was, you know, she was on it. She was passionate, and I think it really worked, like getting their message across as well.
I do also think that that maybe, well, obviously they've been told something about that first debate, and I think there's a couple of moments where Kamala was talking and Mike Pence was about to interrupt her or something, and she shuts it down really quickly, and he does back down. And I was very much like,
that was class.
Yeah,
she was class there.
Yeah, it was very much like both have been told by their advisors beforehand of like, do not do this from last week. Or Kamala's probably been told, make sure you shut him down when he tries to interrupt you, and highlight the fact that they won't let you speak. And Mike Pence has probably been told, don't interrupt. The
moderator was very clear about, you know, the moderator was not in charge, but like, you know, respect the moderator, respect the time.
Yeah.
So I think that was it all sort of came together as I think everyone was just reacting to the first one. I think they would have been a lot more civil in the first place. But
do we think that Pence is the sort of, well, or maybe not Pence 2024, but do we think that it's like that's where the Republican Party will default to post the Trump loss, assuming a Trump loss happens?
I don't know. I mean, you would think that if Trump loses, you would think they would revert to sort of back to normal. But there's also talk of it could Trump could lose, and then, you know, Trump's base and Trump supporters could sort of force a Donald Trump Jr. 2024 thing, which would be interesting.
Hilarious.
But just in terms of Pence, I saw something. Well, someone showed me the other day that he does poll a lot like better as Trump. I think better than Trump as president. Not
Yeah,
like
he does.
he's president, but I think he yeah, I think he polls a bit better.
I think there was only
Obviously
one
Biden would
poll
still be
though.
ahead, but yeah.
I'm not sure. I think it was a single poll. But Pence a couple of points ahead of Trump.
So, just moving on slightly from that, do you think that, because there's been a lot of speculation since those debates that, or Trump's at least said this, that he might not respect the outcome of the election? Like, have you got any thoughts on that, or whether whether he'll actually do that, or what the constitutional implications of that will be? Because that seems to be something that people like to talk about a lot at the minute.
He may well try and do it, but I think my understanding is sort of Americans, the way the American system is set up, there's respect for the Constitution. It's like the president has power, but the Constitution rules over the president kind of to a degree. And if the president was seen to be sort of trying to skirt the law and skirt a peaceful transfer of power, I don't think that would go down very well. And like even Mitch McConnell, who's the Republican leader in the Senate, he's even said, I think, that like we'll try and ensure a peaceful transfer of power.
Yeah, I think that's the key point, though. I think that essentially Senate Republicans are not going to support a minority candidate in Trump desperately holding on to power, because they know that is not, at that point they're looking out for their own backs, and they know that's just not a politically clever move.
I imagine the majority of the Republican Party wants to, go back to normal.
Well, I think if he won, I think they'd be happy to keep Trump around, because
of course,
Trump is
because
their
they'd rather
best.
that.
Yeah, but also because the thing with the Pence coalition is that, well, Trump won off a certain slice of the electorate that Pence probably doesn't appeal to in the same way, and I think Republicans would be worried about their inability to form a majority coalition in the electorate with sort of the Paul Ryan, Mike Pence, fiscally conservative, with a hint of evangelicalism in there. Evangelism? Anyway, but so I just think at that point there's no way that Mitch McConnell and co are going to support him. It's just not a good political calculation on their front.
Well, if you remembering the sort of in 2016 in the primary, and even when he became the nominee or was like going to become the nominee, there was all this talk about the Republican Party needs to try and stop him from being the representative. So I think in an ideal world, the Republican Party would not have a Trump-like figure as their
yeah, but I think that was mainly
nominee,
because they were worried about his electoral prospects. I think that the subtext of that claim was, we can't have someone who's definitely going to lose in 2016, because that's what everyone thought was going to happen.
No, that's a fair point, yeah.
And I think that actually, I just don't think there's that much. I mean, that's the thing. That's the important thing. He might not be like fiscally conservative. He probably hasn't read the Bible, but at the end of the day, if he wins them elections, I think they'd be more than happy to keep him. Josh, what do you think about the whole Supreme Court shenanigans?
Well, we did a video on it yesterday, actually, or we've done a few. Well, we did one yesterday specifically on Amy Coney Barrett, but we've done a couple since Ruth Bader Ginsburg died about, obviously what's going to happen kind of thing. And I just think, there's the cries of hypocrisy that the Republicans stopped the Democrats from doing it, but in 2016. But I mean, you can't really say. But I find it quite hard to believe that if the Democrats had the Senate in 2016, that they wouldn't have tried to push through their nominee. I think his name was Merrick Garland. It was only because Mitch McConnell said, or the Republican said, you can't do it. But I mean,
I'm not sure that's true though. I think that was the first time that convention was broken. I think it's easy to look back with that sort of same retrospective skepticism, but I actually do think that Democrats would have waited. But what do you think about?
But they tried to put him through. They nominated him.
That's true, actually. No, wait.
Like if they
Merrick
were in
Garland.
control of the Senate.
Oh,
I'm talking about the guy Obama nominated.
Yeah,
for the
Obama's
Supreme
nomination
Court in 2016. it was rejected by the Senate Republicans. But I'm saying if the Democrats had control of the Senate, that it wouldn't have been able to, like, it wouldn't have had the rejection possibility.
Yeah, fair enough.
You know?
Do you think? What do you think about Biden's expanding the Supreme Court?
What, to 15?
Yeah, well, to whatever gives him a majority, I suppose. Is that 15? I should keep more of a track.
I haven't actually read much
because he refused to commit to not doing it.
Refused to rule it out. Packing the court stuff.
Yeah, packing the court stuff.
To be honest, I haven't got a great deal of knowledge about that, but you know, they were sort of skirting the question. I know we were just saying they, like, politicians skirt every question, but that was another takeaway of, it might have been the vice presidential debate actually, pushing Harris on it, and she wouldn't say anything, and that was sort of an attack line after the debate. So I don't know, to be honest. Really, I don't want to you know, say too much on that because I haven't really got any knowledge of it, but it does seem like they're sort of avoiding the question.
The question is really about consequences. The question is really that if the Democrats were to pack the court, would that mean in practice a collapse in trust and a collapse in those conventions about appointing judges?
I mean, yeah, you'd have to say so.
But the question is whether or not Mitch McConnell and co. and the Republicans are already at that point. In which case, it's a sunk cost. There's no, you know, for the Democrats, they know, you know, they see it as unfair, the fact that they've had Amy Coney Barrett, you know, gone to Supreme Court, and then Merrick Garland was obviously, you know, declined by Mitch McConnell. They see that as a sort of rank hypocrisy, and for them there's a sort of retributive argument, a sort of basic fairness argument about, well, if you did that and you're eschewing convention, then we're just going to do the same thing. And especially if there's no cost to that, essentially, if it's already the case that the Republicans are going to be as sort of calculated about the Supreme Court as they currently look to be, then, you know, I just think that it looks quite likely now.
How do they make the argument though? Like, how do they make the argument that we pushed for, you know, waiting past the election in 2016 in order to make a Supreme Court just appointment, but now it's okay? Like,
the Republicans?
The Republicans.
Because they have the power to do it.
But there is an argument. Mitch McConnell made a really argument. I can't remember what it was. It was something along the lines of split house.
Is it because there's an incumbent or something? And Obama wasn't going to be the president after 2016. I don't know. It could.
That's really assumptive, though, that Trump
no,
is going to remain.
There was an argument. I can't remember. It was a argument. There isn't a good argument. There was an argument. It annoys me because I remember getting a lot of stick on, well, American political Twitter. But yeah. Should we move on then? No, let's just bang out Brexit.
Okay, so where do we start? Today was meant to be the deadline of negotiations. So today was meant to be the day we were going to find out whether we were going to be going towards a deal or a no-deal situation. Because of the virus and all that, it got pushed back a month. So now everything's in the balance. But there is still a European Council meeting today to discuss things. The issue being that the most recent statement by Ursula von der Leyen and Johnson is that whilst progress has been made, and we published a video on state aid today, the issue is there are still sticking blocks, and there's still no path to a deal currently. Some people are more optimistic, some people are less, but as things stand now, there is no path to a deal yet.
Is a big issue the fisheries and France in particular.
Yes, fisheries.
Yeah, so one of the proposals was that so the UK wants to regain control of fisheries immediately, whilst Europe wants either to have mutual access or gradually reducing Europe's access, because there is a lot of French fishermen reliant on UK fishing waters, and obviously you don't want to kill off a whole industry overnight. So it's that contention, and Europe has this fascination with fish. We've also done a video on the EU channel about this, but fish and agriculture take disproportionate amounts of political and economic capital in the EU. And whilst I personally don't think they're going to hold up a deal just because of fish, it looks like it is. It looks like fish is going to be that.
Are they agreed on state aid as well? Do you know if they're agreed yet, or?
I believe they published a statement yesterday or the day before that didn't mention state aid when all the other ones did before. I'm trying to find it.
I saw that.
Was
I think there was one that was on the 8th of October. Did you see that in the chat?
Yeah, there was a statement.
Yeah, no, Zach's thing was from the 8th of October.
So it could be that we are making good progress.
I'd be very surprised if we'd finished on state aid.
It's like, as the video says, the UK isn't a massive user of state aid, and the EU's state aid regime is particularly restrictive in that it's banned unless the EU allows. But using state aid generally is politically toxic. It's not something that the UK government will want to use willy-nilly, but it's still providing that stumbling block because of the level playing field. Because worst comes to worst, we have an agreement, and then the UK government just channels subsidies into the fisheries, into Dover, into all the exporting industries, and then it will result in what's called economic dumping in Europe, where we basically undercut Europe completely and decimate their industries. So that's why
that's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. But I think Europe.
You think that's what Europe's worried about?
Yeah, because as we've seen with the internal market bill, the UK's approach to Europe isn't a static one. It will do what is best in its best interests at that current moment in time. So I think the EU just want a UK signature on a piece of paper saying you will agree to state aid, even if it's not the fully fledged state aid model of the EU. So it's more like, you will not undermine our single market. And then they can use that clause as a guillotine clause for the entire trade agreement. It's blown out of proportion, but it still could be a stumbling block.
I think it's worth noting, I've just found out that the latest draft of the EU's Brexit sort of communique, whatever the French is basically, it does include, it says the problems are fisheries, level playing field and governance. So it looks like they haven't fully agreed something on state aid, which doesn't really surprise me. I don't think their worry is about the immediate aftermath of a no deal, though. I think it's a sort of longer term, slightly zoomed out concern about, probably, that well publicised Dominic Cummings plan to subsidise the shit out of tech industries or whatever he wanted to do. And I don't think that the UK would do that post no deal, because in the event of a no deal, when there's no trade agreement to supersede the Northern Ireland Protocol, they still have that whole Article 10, whatever the article is on the state aid. It basically gives the EU overreach into the UK's state aid system, which means that the UK state aid system is still subject to the Court of Justice of the European Union. And that's the whole thing about the internal markets bill. So I think that, like, if there was a no deal and they did what you did, you'd just be in such sort of deep about, international law and the internal markets bill versus the Northern Ireland Protocol and all that sort of shenanigans. So I think that would really be the worst outcome of all worlds, is what I'm saying.
Could I just ask, right, I haven't been keeping up with sort of the inner workings of the negotiations and everything very much, but like, how much of an impact on the negotiations did COVID actually have, or is this just something that would have, like, is all these delays and like extensions of deadlines which were supposed to be today, is this, natural in terms of negotiations, or is the fact that they couldn't really meet an actual like stumbling block?
Towards the beginning of the negotiations, after we left, so at the beginning of the pandemic, there were rumours that things were going really badly because the massive groups of diplomats, of technocrats, of civil servants that would have normally met just weren't meeting. It was only very, very small, very small individuals that were attempting to negotiate quite large, complex issues. So on that account, yes, the pandemic has affected things in that obviously negotiators and national governments are going to put the pandemic first. It's going to be save lives, then deal about international trade. So on that account, yeah, it would have. It's had an impact, but negotiations were never going to be easy. It was always a pressed timetable. So whether if we didn't have a pandemic we'd be in the same situation is anyone's guess. But I'd say it's delayed the inevitable, but it hasn't changed negotiations that much.
I think I probably agree with you. Especially, I don't think the logistics have actually affected negotiations that much. You had a couple of rounds of just two people on a Zoom call instead of the hundreds of officials all hanging out, and that had that been the theme, had that continued, that might have I was going to say buggered. Well, I'm just going to say buggered negotiations a little bit. But I think the way in which, and probably slightly underappreciated way in which COVID has definitely affected negotiations, is it's massively decreased Johnson's space for political manoeuvring. And I think he is constantly aware and constantly reminiscent of the Brexit Party, or whatever new reincarnation Nigel Farage's party takes, and the fact that if they do pop up, they will, as they did in 26, whenever May was 2018, when May was Prime Minister, and they took 25% of the vote, they will reliably take 10% of the vote. So if and the fact that he's done so badly politically out of COVID means that he just does not have that space electorally to lose 10% to an extreme Brexity Nigel Farage party if he makes any concessions on fishing or something. I mean, Farage could literally start the fishing party, and that would take the Conservatives below Labour. Whereas, had it been where he was, polling at 45%, with Labour down in the low 30s, Farage wouldn't have started a fishing party because he wouldn't have been worried. But Farage now has that power, and so I think that
the fishing party would do well. I think.
Yeah, he could do well. Split that Tory coalition as well.
I'm just waiting for the Farage party, and then everything will be complete.
That it would go full circle, so it's not even meta, just the Farage party. Yeah. Do you know what I'm waiting for? I'm waiting for Paul Nuttall to lead the Farage party.
Oh, not him.
A long stream of successors to the Farage party.
Only to have Farage come right back to his leader about 5 years later.
What colour is it going to be? He's done purple, he's done light blue. They're all sort of quite neon colours. Oh, neon green. Bet you anything neon green. The Freedom Party, neon green.
Yeah, that's the next one. Is that the one that's wants to do proportional representation?
All of Farage's parties want to do PR.
No, but he said that he was going to start a party after all this with its focus was on electoral reform and reform of the political system generally. Was that?
I think that is the Freedom Party. Yeah, I think that's what it was called.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay.
I think also on this one last thing, I think you guys all saw that whole Priti Patel lefty lawyers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Johnson's conference speech. That is a symptom of the same thing. There's a symptom of it's Farage fear, and the extent to which the Conservative Party will desperately recalibrate to try and keep those Farage voters on side. It's no coincidence that Farage went and sat looking all pretty on those cliffs at Dover, and then obviously Bojo and co start shouting off about how many migrant... Sorry, I got my cat. About how many migrant boats there are and all that shenanigans. Like, they're literally following his tact.
This is why there was a referendum in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, to add on to that as well, there was I think it was last week or the week before, there was a leaked paper that suggested that the UK government had gone to speak to a company about setting up water barriers in the channel.
And
which,
wave
as you say,
machines.
Yeah.
And then eventually deporting them off to that piece of British territory that's 5,000 miles away.
Was it Ascension Island?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah, it's. I mean, as you say, it is all taking on from, and it's so transparent as well. I mean, Farage has found his new thing, which is him being a YouTuber. So we're just waiting for him to release some merch that has, like just some white text on it. Just
is he still subscribing to us?
I haven't checked, but yeah. So he's found his little his niche doing YouTube. And the UK government has followed that and done exactly what you said, Zach. And there's so many examples as well. I mean, they're just the ones that we can think of here.
It's literally 10% of the electorate that are calling all the political shots because this government is terrified of losing 10% of the vote to essentially the Tory equivalent to the Lib Dems, and the smaller party that's slightly to the right of them.
Don't you find it slightly strange that in the last, 7 or 8 years, that Farage has basically caused everything that has, come with Brexit and everything else? Like, the government since that referendum has been, as you've said, basically dictated by Farage and his band of supporters. Like, it's. I just find it. I'm just kind of piggybacking.
What it fundamentally is first past the post. I always go back to this. It's the fact that a 10% vote share in first past the post, despite the fact that the Conservatives are never gonna poll above 50% from here on in. They might have done when they got Brexit done, but that is it. The difference between Farage and not Farage is the difference between a Conservative majority and a Conservative wipeout. So, that's how he wields power. It's mainly a function of first past the post and how the difference between. If we were doing PR, it wouldn't be a stress because the Tories go, oh, we'll take 35% of the vote. We can stick to some principles. And then for those mental immigration measures like the thing on Ascension Island, we can just team up with Farage's MPs and we'll push that through. And for the fiscally sensible stuff, I don't know, there may be some Lib Dem MPs who will back us up or something like that. But it is solely because of first past the post and they know that they're competing for the same voters. And Big Nige can just step in and deal them a killer blow whenever he feels like it. It's quite impressive, though.
Are they ahead in the polls now?
No.
It's almost like Farage is
quite similar.
Is this veto player. What he wants is either going to happen or under a Tory government or Labour's going to get in. He's the linchpin for a Tory majority.
I mean, it is. I don't want to be caricatured, but it is amazing that Dominic Cummings and Nigel Farage are ideologically probably the two most powerful people in the UK. Because Boris has no ideology left, and that that just leaves Cummings with his silly big get a UK Google state subsidy nonsense going.
Well, two things there is number one, do you think that maybe Johnson's lack of any ideology now is partly a result of having to deal with the coronavirus pandemic? Like, naturally speaking, you're going to have to, move slightly to the left in a time of a pandemic and take on more government control. Like, that's going to happen.
Not being able to focus on anything else, to be fair.
Yeah, having said that, I suppose the argument the other way would be that even in the last election, he was taking on quite left-wing policies with, employee.
That's not what I mean by lack of ideology. I mean, look, go back to the. Well, actually, what was your second point? Let's do your 2 points first.
Well, my second point was more of a question specifically to you, Zach, which was that do you think that if the Brexit Party had actually made an agreement with the Conservative Party, like Farage wanted in the last election, that would have almost actually diminished Farage's power and meant that he was sort of similar to Johnson being Foreign Secretary to Theresa May, having someone out of the tent rather than in. Do you think that could have actually reduced his power and that was an oversight of the Conservative Party?
Yeah, definitely. On the Farage point, I mean that was a good chance. They didn't want to be permanently tainted by the brand, but Farage would have also been permanently tainted by the Conservative brand. Farage would not have had the same appeal, had he become a Tory for 2 months. I really think that could have. But then again, you would have also had that thing where, however, by whatever margin they won by, the Conservatives would have been forever indebted to Farage. He would have always claimed that victory, even though Johnson won in the counterfactual that actually happened. In any other universe where Farage joins up with Johnson and they win, Farage is the little man sitting on the side being like, well, you wouldn't have it if it weren't for me.
So all the victories would then go to Farage.
All the credit would have gone to Farage, and and that would mean you'd have even more sort of swaying to Farage policies. Some of which aren't terrible, by the way. I mean, proportional representation, great idea. But on what was the first question about Boris's lack of
ideology?
But Boris, I just don't think. If you read the manifesto, you were right. You go back to that, what you call them left-wing policies. They weren't even policies. I mean, you read the manifesto, and it is just a sort of, I don't know what lack of a better term is, but it's a sort of Corbyn. I know this is a boring analysis, but it's just sort of a Corbyn-like thing, and it was just throwing money at things that he thought sounded good. There was no clever policy. There wasn't a single clever policy in there. It was all, we're going to buy 1 million nurses in 40 hospitals. We're going to invest in the north. And he had, in his last speech at Tory conference, there was no policy in there. There was just, imagine Britain in 30 years' time. We're going to have wind turbines. It's going to be really pretty. You're all going to be rich. And it was just, that was it. And I mean, I suppose, actually, if anything, the only thing you could glean from that is that he might have a focus on, a sort of Cameronite focus on renewable energy in the future. And I think that's probably something you could call like Johnsonite ideology. But
is that not what you have to do, though? Blair did very similarly. Now he
Blair
accepted
had far stronger opinions,
but
definitely.
But the point that I'm making is that he accepted the privatizations of Thatcher, and he tried to appeal to both sides of the electoral divide. And Johnson clearly was successful in doing that, as you saw with the Tories taking back Labour heartlands in 2019, while retaining Conservative strongholds. That wasn't a policy platform. That was a Get Brexit Done platform, which is not a policy in 3 words.
Different lines, really, wasn't it? Tony Blair was more of a centrist, so he naturally was appealing to more people on both sides, whereas Boris's appeal in 2019 was the votes he gained were not along traditional ideological lines. It was all based on Brexit, and it all shifted.
So do you think that that strategy
wouldn't... the same comparison, really?
So you think in the next election that strategy won't be as successful as it was in 2019 because that strategy only worked because it was on a Get Brexit Done platform? It wasn't
Well,
on
it depends how much they consolidate. I was just going to say it depends on how much they consolidate over the time until the next election. I don't think all of the voters will go back to Labour, but I also don't think that sort of shift in votes into the north is a particularly long-term thing unless they properly consolidate. And saying we'll put the House of Lords in York and stuff is
exactly,
it's not really the right way. That's not gonna do anything for someone in Hartlepool or something.
I'm just having to think about it as well, and the Tony Blair analogy is actually a good analogy for explaining how different Johnson and Blair are. Blair really did have policies, minimum wage, Constitutional Reform Act, the devolution stuff as well. That was him. It was serious stuff. There is nothing like that, and that nor has there been in a Conservative manifesto recently, or any Conservative white paper or anything interesting. I mean, the closest thing he's come to a policy, which by the way is not his policy, it's Genric's policy, was the new planning system. And even that is filled with stuff about how we're now going to invest £7 billion in the New Towns Partnership Fund in the North, which is just some generic throwaway money about creating a new town in the North.
Yeah. Do you not think? Well, as you were saying about the Brexit thing, do you not also think that maybe that was what was needed in 2019? That there wouldn't be the time, resources.
No, I'm not disputing that. I'm not saying that necessarily that was an invalid. Let's call it a policy, invalid policy platform. But it's not evidence against the fact that Johnson is devoid of ideology or ideas even.
I suppose the ideology that you would make the argument that he had in 2019 was in relation to the thing that mattered in the country at the time, which was Brexit. And he did have. Would you argue that he also didn't have any ideology on that?
No. It was the right. But I don't. It depends. I mean, now we're getting to the niggly-piggly of what counts as ideology.
Counts as ideology, yeah.
But all we're saying here is that the Get Brexit Done thing was hardly a policy. It was let's get over this and everyone agreed with that, and that's fine. That's good. He was probably right about that.
Yeah,
well done, Boris.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that doesn't demonstrate that he actually has an ideology. It was just the popular thing to say at the time, and sort of what everyone agreed with. I mean, we all thought we should get Brexit done at that point. It was only Corbyn toying with the second referendum, which any sane political strategist would have told him, this is silly, mate, you're going to lose. In 2018 or whatever it was. Yeah. 2019, and he was still toying. Anyway, you see my point. It wasn't clever. It wasn't an ideology. It was just a thing that was obvious to do.
Yeah.
And it was Dominic Cummings for that matter.
Yeah, I mean,
could we not argue that his ideology, and by extension the ideology of the Conservatives, is simply to protect the status quo?
Yeah, maybe. I think probably better described as protect their vote share. And I think that's fine. That's self-interest playing its part. But I don't think they want to protect the status quo, because I think you're actually touching on
constitutional arrangements, which isn't very status quo.
And I think you're touching on an interesting question, which is what are the ideology of the Conservative Party, which is a more interesting question.
But it's contrasting with the radicalism that many saw in the Labour Party. So it was, do you want radical change, or do you want a more pragmatic, we'll change as we go along, let's not have any policy.
I think you've done too much PPEing already, Nelson, because that might have been what small c conservatism nominally means. But remember that the Labour were campaigning on the let's stay in the EU, keep things how they are. The Conservative pitch was buccaneering and that sort of nonsense. And that's definitely not small c conservative in any sense. I mean, it was completely reckless. It was no deal if need be, bugger Dover and Calais, it doesn't really matter, we can deal with it all later. And I think that draws on to the more interesting question, which is about how you're right, how small c conservatism is no longer the guiding principle in the Conservative Party. And what Johnson aside, and maybe Cummings aside even, what actually is the Conservative Party ideologically there for? I mean, it's there for the culture war. It knows it's not that thing. That's about it.
So, I'm going to try and avoid us going down a massive debate about ideology, or at least more than we already have. Because, there's a lot that I'd love to go down here with you, but I feel like maybe listeners might not want that. So we should probably move on before we just debate ideologies.
I didn't mean to make it pejorative. Like, I'm not saying anything positive about, Starmer hasn't really got any policies yet, or Corbyn's policies, definitely not. I'm just saying that at the moment, there is no consistent theme of policy.
Your idea of impartial here, I think, is we trash everybody. So
I love trashing everybody. I just, I think, you know what I think. I like trashing all of them. I think they're all quite rubbish at the moment, and that makes me a little bit miserable. But I also think that you can still do unbiased journalism while thinking they're all shit, which is sort of what I hope to aspire to.
What do you think about Starmer's strategy in terms of changing from like relatively throughout this whole crisis, he's been quite supportive of the government and just acting in the national interest, which I thought was quite good and quite a change from what Corbyn would have probably done. But
what do you think?
Well, he's
you liked it
in terms of what? No, I like how he's been acting in the national interest, but I'm just saying, obviously, recently and especially this week, he's clearly changed tack and gone with proper opposition. Yeah, and I just wonder, in terms of effectiveness, how do you guys think that's going to play?
Nelson, I've had enough of a rant. I'll rant about it in a second, but Nelson.
Yeah, so just in case I don't reveal any political flags, so I always viewed Corbyn as opposing for the sake of opposing. So Starmer's move to we will support the government where it is necessary, so in the national interest, as he was saying, it's a good move, and he has picked the right time to start opposing, in that we are seeing certain failures come to the fore again. So the NHS track and trace app and its notifications, I literally got one a few minutes ago, and then it's the government has has messed up in certain ways, and we can't blame them for messing up all the time, because this is a pandemic that no one knows what the future holds. No one knows what the situation will be tomorrow. It's just what Starmer's doing now is he's using the role of opposition to properly and assiduously be that accountability. So he's now using the slots after the PM does a televised debate. Yeah, he'll use his slot as he's entitled to, and it's providing that balance of, okay, we see why you've done this, but why haven't you done this? It's like today the government announced that it would not be extending the free school meal support package thing over Christmas, despite Marcus Rashford's campaign.
Yeah, if there's one thing that the government should have learned, it's that Marcus Rashford can do no wrong. He is God. So if they want to lose votes, it's the best way of doing it.
And then the issue is this, that I've already seen people raising the notion that the very first week of Eat Out to Help Out, sorry. Which
Eat Out to Take Out.
If they were taking out, policy, they've broken the rules of that scheme.
Well, actually, no, because you were allowed to...
Don't be a burger snitch, Ben.
No, don't be a burger snitch.
You were allowed to eat in, take one bite, and then leave. That was allowed under the rules. But anyway, Eat Out to Help Out, which people on all sides of the political spectrum are going, was that really the best idea for the virus? And now you're saying, oh, during the summer everyone went out. I wonder why. You gave them 50% off their meals. The very first week of that scheme would support free school meals for the entirety of Christmas. So if we see Starmer and the Labour Party now latching on to that and opposing pragmatically, not opposing for the sake of opposing, that I would see as a good move in Labour.
Do you think that they are, though?
At the beginning of Starmer's leadership, no. But there have been...
What you don't think what?
So at the beginning of Starmer's leadership, he was too slow to abandon the past. It was only after his conference speech that I thought that we'd seen a shift in Starmer's position to a more statesman, a more opposition for the sake of the national interest politician. So it's if he continues on down that path, if he keeps putting national interest first, then that's a positive move.
So you mean the when you say you thought he'd only ditched the past, like at the time of the conference, you mean the conference like a couple of weeks ago?
Yes. Yeah. So that's where I saw a marked change in his behaviour.
But I suppose, I mean, the sacking of Rebecca Long-Bailey earlier this year, I thought that was a big, at least an indication, at least.
She had to go.
Yeah, she had to go. She was...
So, let's just be honest, she was rubbish.
Yes. Yeah, but irrespective of that, does that not? Do you not think that indicates a change at all? Then you think that that's just?
I don't think that was a deep-rooted change. I think that was a more we need to make an outward gesture, saying that.
You think that was a sort of token?
Yes.
Like,
yeah. So what truly to me has marked this change, other than the conference speech, is the sacking of all his private secretaries that voted against his wishes on the MI5 bill. There was a bill going through Parliament that would have allowed, basically given a free pass for Secret Service agents to skirt the law in foreign jurisdictions. Starmer told his party to abstain, and a number of people, I think all of them were from the Socialist campaign group headed up by Corbyn, voted against. And being the strong man and going, no, I told you to abstain, I'm now going to punish you, that is, he's almost standing his ground. And if we see him standing his ground for longer, we could probably see a better, stronger Labour Party.
All right. I agree with you on the better, stronger Labour Party thing. I think that he's definitely standing up to the people he needs to stand up to within the Labour Party more. I think there's an interesting question about the efficacy. There's two questions here. There's one, what I think, and two, the sort of more public efficacy of his coronavirus strategy, which I think is waning. I think it was a very good strategy, and you're right, he looked like constructive opposition sort of thing, you know what I mean? Like, where's the evidence? I think this is a good policy prime minister, but where's the evidence? But I don't think this is entirely his fault. I think what was depressing to see, I'm sure you all noticed this, is Starmer did try to be a constructive opposition leader. Like, he was genuinely asking sincere questions, and he got back the biggest load of crap from Johnson, not just in PMQs, but generally. I mean, he got the whole sort of, how dare you insult our NHS? He got the whole, oh, you live in North London. I mean, Johnson's literally called like Alexander Boris
than the American accents.
I know. Well, now the rage is coming out. And did any of you watch Johnson's conference speech? Whoever hasn't watched it, it's not actually boring. You should watch. Did anyone watch it?
I did. I think I didn't watch the whole thing. I read through. There were some notes on it, and there was the transcript, which I read. It was
appalling. And did you see his thing where he had a go at just nonsensical goes at the Labour Party about
Didn't they bring up lefty lawyers again?
Brought up lefty lawyers, brought up do-gooders, brought up Rule Britannia, brought up rewriting history. I mean, it was just a culture war nonsense. And then he brought up their housing planning reform, which actually, by the way, for what it's worth, is not a bad policy. It's a step in the right direction, but completely insufficient. And he then did a whole, we want to make sure you have houses. The Labour Party live in North London, but they don't want you to have houses. They're sitting in their big North London house. Like, come on, like, this is just pathetic. And I think Starmer originally wanted to be a constructive politician, but he's just been dragged down slightly by you just can't. If you're trying to be not, you know what I mean, if you're giving someone a little bit of space to explain themselves and all they do is spout back sort of pseudo patriotic nonsense about don't talk about the NHS like that, you anti-Rule Britannia, then you end up at the lowest common denominator. And I think that has slightly happened for Starmer, because he's definitely a more political figure than he was at the start of this coronavirus crisis. I think that's evident in his lockdown thing, because whether or not he thinks it's genuine, but whether or not it's a genuine proposals and he thinks it's worth doing, the tone of the attack is marked different from how it was at the start of the pandemic. And I think this is an interesting question as to whether or not, because you've all seen that he's called for a lockdown.
The circuit break.
Yep. And it will be really politically effective, and it will win in votes if Johnson does indeed go for it, because then it looks sort of foresight and prescient, and it looks like
people seem to forget that Johnson was the one who first. I think wasn't he the first one, or at least politician, to use the phrase circuit break, and he was the first one to float the idea about a week or two ago. And it's only just come back into discussion this week.
It was in Sage Minutes, I think, a month ago.
So that was a month ago. That was when Johnson floated the idea after the circuit break phrase came up in Sage Minutes, and then he floated the idea and decided against it, and now we're on to this. Now Starmer's turn to float the idea. But if he doesn't go for it, and I think at the moment it looks politically calculated by Starmer. I don't know what you guys think about that.
I mean, I can see why people think that it's politically calculated. As you say, it was brought up in Sage Minutes, a month ago. I don't know exactly how long, but a certain number of weeks ago at least. Johnson decided not to press ahead with it. I didn't hear Starmer calling for it a month ago. Johnson didn't call it this week, and then Starmer suddenly decided, now's the time, we need a circuit break. Maybe
that's my point.
Maybe that is calculated. Maybe the science suggests that now is the right time to do a circuit break, and that cases are now on an upward trajectory at such a point where we need to stop it, and it's now is the right time to do that. Maybe that's the case. Maybe it is just a political decision, and that it makes it seem like Johnson has had his chance to call it. He hasn't done it yet, and Starmer's capitalising on that. That depends on your partisan persuasion there. Which interpretation you take. But, I can see how it can be played to make it look like Starmer's doing it as a calculated political move.
Yeah, you've made my point better than I have. Exactly that. Yeah, because the circuit break thing was pitched earlier. Starmer didn't sound keen on it at the time. And then, now that we haven't gone for it, he's sounding pretty keen on it.
Yeah.
And I just on the question of political efficacy, I don't know how well that plays with voters. And I actually don't think it plays particularly well. I think it does look calculated.
I think the Labour Party also has a history of anybody that's sort of centrist or far away from the left-wing persuasion within the Labour Party immediately get the calls of you're doing it for, you're doing it like game playing or political point scoring or something like that. Like you're not truly doing it from an ideological perspective. And I think that Starmer's I think he himself has even said that he would be more of a centrist, or at least alluded to that sort of idea. And I think that almost doesn't help him, because people will be more keen to view that as not an ideological statement, more of a political point scoring sort of thing, similar to Tony Blair or Harold Wilson or people like that who maybe are more centrist, are commonly accused of similar sort of point scoring. So I think maybe that doesn't help him too much.
Oh yeah, next time we need to all watch PMQs.
PMQs, yes. I'd like a discussion on
PMQs roundup. That's Ben's good. Ben's good at that, aren't you, Ben?
Yeah. I did one of my last pieces of work at uni was evaluating a number of Prime Minister's questions. So I'm a big fan of PMQs. So I'm more than happy to have a discussion on PMQs next time.
They're quite juicy these days as well.
They really are. They really are. They're a lot more. I think Starmer versus Johnson are a lot more interesting to watch than Corbyn versus Johnson.
Also, they've got spicier.
Fun as an empty chamber.
Yeah, there's still a lot of background noise though. It's still I think it still sounds very similar.
Do they pipe in the crowd noise?
From FIFA.
Yeah. I hope it's as badly sort of put together as the football ones. Like they're just slight, like a few second delays after the quips, like on football. But
sometimes when the goals get, when the goals get ruled out retrospectively, you get a hilarious cut off.
Yeah. I want them to do similar with Prime Minister's questions. I think that'd be great. I think that would really increase viewership. So that's my campaign over the next week. So yeah, cool. Let's do this again next week then.
All right, nice one.
All right. How do we? I don't know how to end
this.
Just
to say thanks for listening. You didn't have to.
Yeah, that'll do. Good. We'll cut it there.